So my name is Staszek, I work in JIT team, and today I would like to tell you the story about, release story, about aiming for releaseable increments. So let's start with a bit of theory. If we open the Scrum guide, there are a lot of sentences there, but one sentence is really important to me. And this is this sentence, that if we finish the sprint, we should finish the sprint with something which is potentially releasable, something which is ready to be deployed on production server, or something which is ready to be given to end customers. So in other words, if we have two events, if we have some change, on example, some commit, and we have moment of time when we see that this change is done, is ready to be given to customers, then the time gap between these two moments should be quite short. So in Scrum, by definition, this time should be no longer than one sprint. But if we look at the practice in different organizations, especially in the organization which develop quite complex IT systems with a lot of components, a lot of dependencies, with some legacy parts inside, we can find a little bit different practice. There is a change, and after the change, we have a lot of activities like compilations, deployment, integration, testing, bug fixing, retesting. And only after all these activities, which can take a lot of time, we can say our change is done and we can give it to customers. So in my current project, we started from the right situation and we try to implement potentially releasable features. And I would like to tell you the story about this experience. So let's start with the context. The project is about creating a quite complicated IT system. This system consists of many elements. Part of this components is created by external vendors. Part of these components are created in-house. The thing is quite big, so we have several development teams, at the moment 8 of them. We also have product owners. System is divided into functional areas, so we have 5 product owners at the moment. And during the project, 3 environments, 3 integrated environments have been created. So we have testing, pre-production, and production. And at the very beginning, there was decision about working Scrum and to work in 2 weeks sprints. And there was one more important decision at the beginning. This decision was to work in sprints and make deployment of production after each and every sprint. And you can ask the question, what's so strange in this? Because this should be quite normal. However, this company was used to different mode. This company used the mode when we have series of sprints, and then we have something called release candidate. And then we have quite long period for testing this release candidate. And only after this, we have deployment on production. So in fact, the game was about switching from the top image to the bottom one. So we start our work on aiming for this bottom picture when the project was quite advanced, when teams were at 8 sprint, when there was one initial deployment on production before, and then we started to think, okay, how to deploy it during every sprint. And we start this journey from gathering the expectation. We went to the different persons and we asked them the question, how would you imagine the perfect releasing, the perfect deployment process? And we gathered different answers. So we asked product owners, and their answer was, we would like to have things on production as quickly as possible. And it was quite natural, because if a product owner has some feature, he's interested in having on production to get the value from this feature. We also asked stakeholders, the persons who worked closely with end customers. And they said, wait, not so fast. If we have something new in our application, let's give us the chance to see this feature before giving it to customers, because we need to be familiar with changes, with new changes in our application. We asked members of development teams, and they said, well, we don't really care how often we deploy to production, but we would like to know the rule. Please tell us what the rules are, because at the moment we are a little bit lost with all these deployments and procedures. In organization, there is a special team called Quality Assurance, and they said we are responsible for ensuring that our application has the good quality. So we really need to have release candidate, and we need some time to test this candidate. It's not long time, a few days will be enough, but we still need it. And we had release manager who said, well, I'm a lazy person and I would like to make this release process as simple as possible. And if we can get something from Scrum, let's get it. So we had our expectation and we started to create the model of the process. We realized that we need to answer the question how to release new version of our application to production environment. And this question can be split into 3 smaller questions. So how do we deploy the changes from technical point of view? If we deploy a new version of our product, of our system, what features it contains? And what is the schedule? When should we do the deployment? The answer from the first question were quite simple. It was about pipelines. Development teams needed to create delivery pipelines to move the changes from one environment to another. What they did. We had a small challenge because the components are different and also pipelines are written in different tools, but we managed to use them. Answer for the second question was Jira, because development teams use this famous Agile system. So we just decided to use a fixed version, which is built, and we started to mark changes in new releases by this field, and it works quite smoothly. The answer for the last question was more complicated, and let me draw it on example. So teams work in 2-week sprints. During the sprints, they put their changes into test environment, which is common for all the teams. So we have some integration. And at the end of the sprints, of course, there is a review done from this test environment. After sprint review, we deploy the changes which are done during the sprint to pre-production environment. Then we have some time for making this release candidate testing. And if there's a release candidate testing is successful, then we have deployment to production system. And because sprints happens one after another without any break, this release candidate testing is done in the same time as the next sprint. So as the result, we have deployments every 2 weeks. However, the deployment to production is delayed by 1 week, counting from end of the sprint. So we had our answer. We thought this is quite a good model. Let's try to use it. We start to use it and we found the problems. The very first problem that we noticed was the fact that sprints of the team were not synchronized. So the team started and finished the sprint in during different days. And it was the problem for us because we needed to have one common date when all the sprints are finished. So we needed to synchronize what we did. The second problem was more difficult because it occurred at the very beginning that our product owners and stakeholders wanted to use this regression testing period as a time for cherry picking the changes. So they wanted to just take some good changes and put it in production and then maybe stop some other changes because, well, I changed my mind. I don't want to have this change anymore. And we learned this in a quite difficult situation because during one of the first releases, we found out that one of the change contains a very serious bug and it must not be deployed in production. So because we had several product owners and because we had a release that was compiled from the good changes and one buggy changes, there was immediately the question, who is in charge? Who should take the decision about deploying it or not. So in theory, it's simple. Scrum says it's product owner who takes this decision, but we had several product owners, and the organization was not so sure that product owners should be empowered with this such powerful mechanisms are stopping or allowing the release. And last but not least, the classic problem with dependencies. So changing two components, one part is ready, second part is not. And we learn about this dependency in the latest possible moment, and we need to make decision what to do with this. So we fixed this desynchronization problem. We learned how to, we educated our product owners, stakeholders about the meaning of this regression testing phase. We tried to manage the dependencies, but there was one problem that was really hard to solve. Let's look at the schedule once again. So we have series of sprint, one after another, and this regression testing phase marked as striped rectangles. So initially, we assumed that during this regression, we will have only small bug fixes. So we'll just approve the stories and done, and one small fix here and we'll be done. It occurred that we discovered a lot of problems during this regression. Moreover, we found out that there were some features that were not able to test on test environment, and team postponed the testing to this regression test. And when we hit the hard time, when we faced strong push to deliver, some teams took the decision to move the testing to this regression testing, because we will test it anyway, so let's do the development in sprint and let's test it later. The result was easy to predict, because during this period, team members were split into two very different activities. First of all, they work on new features from the current sprint, but on the other hand, they also participated in retesting and bug fixing on the previous stuff. So focus of the team went down, the team predictability went down, product owner satisfaction went down, overall satisfaction also went down. And there was one more important problem. When we participated in sprint review, which was done from testing environment, the teams proudly presented their result, and they said, this feature is completed, it's done, it's working, we are proud of this, and we really hoped to have this feature in 1 week on production environment. It was our hope. However, then we faced the problems during the regression, and then it occurred that sometimes the consequence of the problem is either delay of this release, or even canceling the whole release and switch it to the next deployment window. So we hoped for the change which is done. However, we received during sprint reviews the set of changes in unknown state. So maybe it's done, maybe it's not done. We will know about it later. We also observed that our stakeholders moved their attention slowly from sprint reviews to the meeting related to regression testing, because only on this meeting about regression testing, they were able to see the real status of the changes. So it was so painful that we started to look for better solution. And on paper, the better solution is very simple. You need to take the striped rectangle, you need to take this regression test and put it into the sprint. That's all. So in fact, this is quite simple change in definition of done. You need to write only that during the sprint, at the end of the sprint, just the change must be deployed and tested on pre-production, and we have it. We started to talk about this change with members of development teams. Some teams said, yeah, in our component, in our technical environment, we can do it, no problem. And other teams said, well, it will be really, really difficult to do, because we would need to decompose our stories to the smaller ones, because we need to fit the testing in our sprint, more testing, so we need to reduce time for development, so we need to decompose our stories. We are concerned about frequent deployments to pre-production, because pre-production must be stable, and how to do it. There was opinion, maybe our sprints are too short, maybe we should extend this period. For sure, teams realized that they needed to deal with dependencies in a better way, because if sprint should end with something which is really, really releasable, then all dependencies must be resolved. There is no waiting with resolving with dependency. For sure, teams realized that they need better automated testing. And my favorite sentence that I heard was this. Yeah, there is such a theory that you can do all the testing in the sprint, but in practice, it never works. So during this, we really experienced true behind the sentence that I read some time ago on some page about LESS framework, that our agility is constrained by technical agility, by the ability to decompose the stories, by the ability to make frequent deployments, by the ability to write automated testing together with development. So at the moment, we are still in this mode with all the pain that it has inside, but we do several actions, and we hope to switch to the bottom mode as soon as possible. This is a short presentation, so let's switch to learnings or takeouts. We very briefly talked about 3 models. So long release candidate testing phase after series of sprint, after a longer period of development, or making a short release regression testing after each sprint, or not doing regression testing at all, so doing it inside the sprint. And my experience is that switching between this model is really the revolution. So there are some enthusiasts who says, well, let's do it. It will be great. And the world will be really, really beautiful. There are some skeptics. The skeptics, they say, no, it will never work. Not in our conditions, not in our technical stuff. And let's stay in the current status quo. There is hard work to do it. There is a lot of things you need to learn. So how to make frequent deployments, how to write automated testing, how to decompose the stories. And there are some things that you need to unlearn. You need to unlearn that there will be something like stabilization phase. You need to unlearn that there will be long regression testing of the features. So this is really the revolution. And looking at our case, we were not so much successful. So this is real data about series of sprints we did and result of deployment after each sprint. So if you would like to measure number of successful deployments after the sprints, it's 50%. So in half of the cases, we were able to finish regression testing in time and deploy it on production. So from one perspective, it's not so impressive result, but there is a good thing in this image. The good thing is that if the start cycles take 2 weeks, then if we do something wrong, we have opportunity to improve it quite shortly. The feedback loop is quite short. So still, this is hard work, and if there is something hard to do, it's easy to give up. It's easy to say, why? Let's stay in current state. Let's not go further. So for me, this is really important to remember about reason for this approach. And I see 2 types of reason. First reason is the business reason, and it's related with time to market. This is ability to give the customers the valued features quite quickly. But there is also technical reason. We started with saying that quite often we have long time delay between making a change and marking this change as done. And what I experience is that this time period is filled with a lot of frustration and a lot of pain. I saw the situation when this phase about regression testing and preparing a system to deployment on customers took 2 years. And you can imagine how frustrated the organization was being in the regression testing phase for 2 years. So all the efforts that we put in putting these 2 moments in time closer to putting this change and making this change then closer also it also limits the pain. And for me, this is the reason for this change. This is my wish for you and for myself also, and maybe you have some questions.
If you have any questions, please write them down in together so we can speak up and give them to Staszek. In the meantime, I really loved Schrödinger change. I really love it. And from your experience, Staszek, is it connected with definition of done or the struggling with sprint goal on team level?
Well, the sprint goal is for me totally another story. So there could be another talk about struggles with definition of sprint goals. But now, what we focus in current project and what I see as a problem is organization is just this problem with regression testing and technical debt. Because if technical debt is high, then quite usual this regression testing is manual process, and if it's manual process is long, and if it's long, our ability to deliver changes to production are quite limited.
Thank you. And we have a question from Marta. What is your suggestion how to convince teams to synchronize sprints when they have argument that they are working on different components?
Okay, so we didn't convince the teams to synchronize. We just told them that you have to do it. Simple like this. And we argued that at the end, we need to have one version of the system, which is our release candidate. And this system, this release candidate must contain all the components. So we have one team who provides components. Yeah, we just follow it. Simple like that. We have one team which deliver their changes 3 times a week. So every week they have 3 versions of new components, and still this is fine, because if we have the moment when we start our regression testing, we just take the newest version of this component and we are fine. So it's no problem with delivering changes more often, but teams need to be ready for given date to give their version of the components.
This synchronization is quite interesting for people, because we have another question from Konrad, and it will be the last question. Is sprint synchronization really needed to release something that works? How is it working for you currently, Staszek?
So currently we have it because at the end we produce the common product. So if the sprints when the sprints are not synchronized, we won't have the moment of time when we have something to deploy that. So, but if the dependencies between the components are weak, then I can imagine the world when these sprints are not synchronized. So I think we should start with product definition. What is our product?
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. I love this. Thank you very much, Staszek. I invite you to continue this discussion with Staszek via Slack on the dedicated channel. You can find it when you can use the plus sign and find Staszek Matczak and his talk. So the discussion will be right now. I think you can attend to those questions right now via Slack. Thank you very much, Staszek.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.